2018-19. That would include construction and all education outreach activities. And finally, the last deadline to get all of your reports, deliverables, and invoicing done will be March 31st, 2019. Education outreach. Everyone should be well aware of the importance that we've put on the education and outreach aspect of this proposal. All education outreach must be designed to increase the students' understanding of the water quality benefits of the new installation. We also envision that we encourage student participation at all levels of the process. So if as part of your proposal you can demonstrate that they've been involved in the planning, the design, somehow in the implementation or the post-construction performance monitoring, that would be great. We encourage that. What I was going to say is, I guess one of the concerns I've had with the number of public agencies we've had inquire getting that pre-approval and coming out on behalf of a school district is I want to make sure that there's no disconnect between their objective of getting a stormwater capture project installed and losing the importance of the education and outreach, and making sure that that school district is fully on board with integrating the education aspect into their curriculum. So keep that in mind. Okay, wrapping up, just a quick repeat of the scoring criteria, the points that we've assigned. This is going to be a reflection of the importance we've put on these categories. You'll see that, of course, the technical has been given 30 points. Repeating the importance of the education and outreach has 35 points. The budget has been given 5 points. Your schedule will be 10. Operations and maintenance, 10. The monitoring and assessment and performance will be 5. Multiple benefits will be 5, and the bonus points for your ability to quantify how much disadvantaged school participation you can will be worth a bonus points of 15 for a total of 115. So again, some of those things Brandon's going to be revisiting in greater detail as part of the application presentation. I'm going to go ahead and see if we have any questions about what I've presented so far. But otherwise, I will be ready to turn over to Brandon.
Is the disadvantaged schools set aside split north and south, or is it statewide?
That split is statewide, and we'll be allocating those eligible. When we get to the point of awarding those grants, it'll be reflective of the north-south split.
Is it proportionalized north and south then?
No, not going to be proportionalized. We'll have to evaluate what comes in, what's eligible, and what we want to award, and at that point we'll figure out how it's going to play out.
Good morning. In looking at the guidelines for the programs, I didn't see any discussion on reclaimed water use for irrigation. Has that been thought about, or is there any consideration being given to that to retrofit a campus, per se, to use reclaimed?
That would really fall, I guess, under like a water recycling. That is not something that we, I guess, are prepared to go into as part of this program. I don't think. It's maybe under the water conservation aspect, limited to that 10%. But I will put a plug in that we do have some aggressive funding programs with our other water recycling programs, so there may be options to consider if that is an interest. And I'd be happy to give you some content information too. Okay, another question?
Going through the guidelines, I did see something about energy projects, whether they be solar or what have you. How do those play into the decision-making process?
I believe we had some energy conservation targets as part of it'll be part of our multiple benefits evaluation. How it's going to fit into a stormwater capture element is going to be a tough fit. I don't know if we have any additional thoughts on that, but I think it's really something that we'd like to be able to, if you can make a connection to that in your proposal and say that we are seeing these energy savings because we are reducing our pumping, yeah, reducing our irrigation, or Kevin, you have a thought there? Please, make the case.
This is more of a passive case, but the project example that I showed, the Mount Tabor Middle School, where we placed a large rain garden on the south-facing exposure of the building, we introduced a lot of trees there for the sole purpose of trying to shade that south face. So it's passive solar energy use in that respect. It's not active, but being able to introduce landscaping in specific areas that can help reduce energy costs passively seems to be a good fit.
Seems like a fair case, yes. Okay, question behind you?
Going back to the 10% indoor water conservation, how do you recommend we quantify the savings at the indoor level? Is there going to be like a form that needs to be completed?
We don't really have as part of the application, we're not going to require specifics on the savings. We will have, as part of the application, our performance assessment. And in that case, you'll have to probably do some kind of support for how much water savings you anticipate, based on what we're using now versus what we plan to install. We anticipate over the course of a year, we would save X amount of gallons. Any more questions in the room? If not, I'll let Sarah ask her email questions.
Okay, there are two questions. The first is, can a county office of education that serves several school districts apply for projects in more than one school district?
That is the case where, yes, we would anticipate that a county office of education could represent multiple school districts. And so, yes, you would be representing those school districts and at the same time verifying that they are not going to, they have no intent of doing their own application that would overlap with what they're proposing.
The second question, it's a little bit unfortunate. I think Kevin just snuck out, so I'm going to suggest to Jeff to put Darla on the spot if needed. The question is, the landscape examples provided seem to be more appropriate for the areas that receive more than 3 to 5 inches of rainfall per year. How is this grant applicable to areas like the southern San Joaquin Valley?
Do you want to respond to that?
This is Darla Inglis. I'm one of the technical leads as well, and Kevin just stepped out. The plant palettes that Kevin was showing were basically more for the northern region. We've been developing with the Low Impact Development Initiative plant palettes that will work for our more Mediterranean and hot and dry climates, appropriate heights and appropriate for small water levels, higher water levels. So we will have the technical assistance will be able to provide that type of assistance on the appropriate plants in the dry hot areas.
Okay, I believe that's all the questions for this portion. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brandon Davison, who's going to go into some of the process for the application. Brandon.
Why, thank you, Jeffrey. Of course it's on, but I'm a loudmouth as well, so even if it weren't, I'm sure you'd hear me. So that's right, I'm Brandon Davison. I'm going to help you run through the Drops application process. So to start off, we're going to just take a quick look at our financial assistance application submittal tool screenshot. So nothing really to discuss here. I just wanted to give you a heads up as this is what you will find when you go to our website and find the FAAST application. We're going to have far more detail on this application process coming up shortly, so I'm going to go ahead and move on, but at least that's how you would recognize our page. And when you get to the application, you can see that we have tabs, drop-down menus, drag and drop capabilities. We really encourage that you use the required attachments to use for more descriptive answers, to add letters of commitment, show maps and photographs, etc. Okay. And then, of course, for those of you that might just want to get a heads up as to what we'll be expecting without necessarily creating a FAAST application, just to see what we're kind of shooting for, if you go to our Drops website, all of the required attachments for the FAAST application can be found there. You can go to our Drops page, click on those attachments, and see what they are. So if you want to just browse through, they can be found there at the Drops website. However, all of the attachments in that FAAST application are linked to these templates, so it's not like you'll need to download them and do it. You can go ahead and go to the FAAST page, and you will find them there as well. So our application components. What are these items to consider when you are planning to apply? We have 7 required attachments and 2 optional attachments, which I will go through in more detail shortly. And there are several FAAST questions in the application that will require more than 1 attachment per question. So we want to be sure that everybody is aware that even though you may be on a single question, there may be more than 1 attachment that is required for submission. Please be attentive to that. So here's our first 6. You can see it's essentially some of the items that we've already discussed before, but again, I will go through these in more detail shortly. And as mentioned, there are 7 required and 2 that are optional. So here we can see the 2 that are optional. Perhaps you're not a disadvantaged school, or perhaps you're not part of a local watershed group, and I will get to more details on that. But just be sure that you're confronting all of these attachments, since they will be required, except for the 2 optional ones. So starting off with our technical. Please submit technical descriptions for each school site that is going to be proposed to have work done on it. We'd like to see maps, photos, current site descriptions, what sort of project you're proposing, where, when, who's going to do it, who are the players, do you plan to have your students do most of the work, do you plan to have somebody else do most of the work? Let us know these items in your technical application or technical attachment. So we have envisioned sort of 2 sides of the spectrum of what kind of folks are we going to have applying for this project. So we have those that have like conceptual proposals with plans for specific LID types and where they might go and be implemented. For this type of applicant, we'd like to see who the players are and how they will gear the project to meet our education and outreach goals. So obviously a technical project team might not necessarily have their education outreach elements very well designed. But also we have the other end of the spectrum of our applicants, and we are expecting those to be schools and educators who might have student-led designs that have yet to be developed and geared for student, teacher, parent collaborations, and the education and outreach components are what they're really geared for. So we don't want anybody to be left out. You may have a very specific plan in mind with a design, or you may just have an idea that we really want to get these students involved, and how can we do this? Well, we'd like you to demonstrate, if you're the school, how you will make that happen and have an understanding that you have the capability to coordinate such an endeavor. So you can see here we have that technical project style, and we have the education kind of style. And we will be expecting both of those. So don't feel that you're going to be hurt by being an educator that really doesn't know how you're going to make this happen. That's why we have the Liddy Institute here for help to do these technical assistance, okay? Of course, we have an attachment for our education and outreach. And notice that that is the highest score that we're going to apply to our scoring criteria, because these are projects for schools. So when you've applied, we've applied the high score to the education outreach component since it's a school program, and we really want you to address that. So part of these requirements are that they must take advantage of the installation that you are actually putting in. And they should have the education course that is integrated for your local, water systems. Part of your student involvement might include project development, implementation, participation, or the post-construction activities. We would also like to know if you're going to have your community involved, like the PTA or local government or your local watershed group, and who your education and outreach team is. We are expecting these to be folks that are directly involved with the education system, whether that be school administrators, school educators, or consultants for the school itself. Moving on, we have our budget attachment. You can go online and see examples of our detailed budgets and our budget summary. And what we're going to be expecting for this is that we want detailed budgets for site-specific costs, though we are leaving the detailed budget optional because we may not have those details pinned out. And we expect a summary budget that captures the grand total of all project costs. And notice that, as you see at the bottom, we accept no indirect costs. And what is an indirect cost? Indirect costs are costs not directly accountable to the stormwater projects. And to give you an example, those are markups, those are overheads, and those are profits that are added to invoices that are not part of a stormwater capture project. Here's an example of our budget template. You can see it's simply an Excel spreadsheet that asks for what will be the tasks and line items on the left-hand side. We would ask for what is the grant amount requested, what is the match amount that you will be contributing. There's a column for any additional sources of funding that will be added to the project, and then we have a total column to see how much the total project element of that task will cost. And then, of course, we have a percentage to determine how much of that line item is going to administration, how much to construction, how much to education and outreach components. So our budget with reimbursable costs. Reimbursable costs are those associated with the implementation of the project. Please separate costs out of your budget that are not reimbursable costs. And if you need assistance, please contact the Drought staff for additional details on determining what kind of costs are eligible for the project. And we gave you a simple example here, like a picnic table that does not actually have some kind of stormwater capture element in the table itself, or an art element that does not show an education and outreach component would not be considered an eligible cost for stormwater.
Brandon, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
We have a question from online, and the question is, are permits an eligible cost for grant funds?
Permitting is an eligible cost because they will be a required element to implement the project. So CEQA, absolutely. You can charge that to a grant project because it is required for you to implement the project itself. So again, questions like that, feel free to contact Jeffrey and myself. We'd be happy to talk with you to determine what is an eligible cost and what isn't. And a great example is an ADA compliant ramp. A sidewalk that doesn't capture water might not necessarily be part of a stormwater capture, but if it's required as part of a law, structural thing, we will pay for that, okay? Here again, back to our match requirements. It's just to reiterate that it is on a sliding scale. We do anticipate that there's going to be large school districts that have far more capability to come up with the funds for their match requirements, or smaller schools might have a more difficult time coming up with these match requirements. So we're throwing this back out here because we want to sort of touch on how is it that my small school is going to be able to come up with all of this money to match the grant requirement. So part of these requirements can be achieved in other ways other than cash contributions, such as in-kind services. Some examples might include teacher time, school administrative staff working on the project, parents, volunteers, even students we can accept as in-kind match contribution. We have additional information on this, and we highly recommend that you get a hold of the DROPS staff members to find out what kind of in-kind services would be eligible and what kind of prices you can charge. Students under 16, we'll allow 4 1/4, for example. Teachers, we'll allow their salary, for an example, based on an hourly basis. Volunteers, they may be worth, depending on their age, federal minimum wage, or they may be worth something else, okay, if you can justify that. What we would rather do is, rather than tell you what you must provide, we would actually like to ask you what you can provide and see if we can't justify the reasons for that. Cash requirement is not required. It can be in-kind matches. And
Brandon?
most of our grant programs rarely do they send us a check, though we could
Brandon?
probably handle that.
I'm just going to repeat his question for the people online. There was a question from the audience asking if there was a minimum cash match requirement. And so
Yeah.
Brandon answered that.
If you'd like to send an envelope with cash to the Drops program, I'm sure that we could find somewhere to put it. All right, so moving on to our next attachment in the application process would be our readiness and schedule. And what do we expect in this? The schedule should convey an understanding of the required elements to move your project forward. So please consider things that you need to submit, things like certification, and things that might be time-consuming elements like delays that might happen in weather or restructuring utilities, or things like the permitting process that might take time. Consider what sort of delays you might have and try to respond accurately as to how you would respond to those. Things that we want to know is your project ready to go? And unfortunately, we had a representative from the DSA. We'd like to wonder if you, we would wonder if you have designs prepared, how you're going to implement your project, what are your education activities. And notice then with our schedule, we would prefer that you go ahead and everybody use a standard start date of June 1st, 2015, just so you can have some sort of estimate, well, rather than an estimate, a specific date that you can plan on expecting your project to start. And then notice that we have a work completion date by February of 2019.
Brandon, we have one online question.
Mm-hmm.
What types of projects will require CEQA?
I believe that nearly every project that we have in our grant program is going to require CEQA of some variety or another. Now, is that going to be a mitigated negative declaration, or is it going to have to require an environmental review? That is going to be something that your group is going to have to determine when you apply. Okay? So it will be required for all projects. It takes a moment.
Okay, there we go. The CEQA requirements, all projects are required to comply with CEQA. The State Water Board is required to comply with CEQA in our awarding of the grant. So I think a lot of the projects will end up being exempt from CEQA notices of exemption, but that's something that you need to evaluate as you're developing your project, because it certainly could affect your timeline if it is a more involved CEQA review process. But we will require submittal of some sort of CEQA document to the State Water Board so that we can do our CEQA process also.
Thank you, Leslie. And Leslie's correct. We actually do expect most of these to be notices of exemption, since they'll be probably done on pre-existing sites, right? So here we have to continue with the readiness application. You know, some of the categories we'd like to see in your schedule are seen here, and we would suggest that you consider using this as an outline for developing your schedule, since these items actually mirror the budget items. So when you're considering your schedule, you can refer to your budget and your technical review and say that this is a good outline to use, okay? As far as the operation and maintenance, we're going to apply 10 points to that attachment. We'd like you to describe how the project will be maintained for 20 years. So we've already had questions. I had somebody text me directly to my cell phone asking me, how does somebody do operation and maintenance for 20 years? Well, it is a requirement for the grant. It is put in the guidelines on page 12. So how do we do this? Well, it has to be done for 20 years because these projects are being paid by the taxpayer. We're all paying for this. So we want to be sure that the projects are going to be long-term and do the water quality benefits that we're shooting for. So how would I do my operation and maintenance for 20 years? Be certain to consider that in your application as to what type of LID will you be implementing. If your LID operation and maintenance requirements is simply replacing plants every 3 years or so, That will be a cheap fix, won't it? But if you are putting in permeable pavers, for example, they require specialized vacuum sweepers to maintain 20 years of maintenance. They will be expensive, but you will be on the hook to do this for 20 years. That might mean that it's the school that has the responsibility of these operation and maintenance for 20 years. You'll need to describe how you will do this. If, on the other hand, your pre-approved public agency is the person that's on the hook for the grant, they will be on the hook for doing the operation and maintenance for 20 years, okay? And then something that might be confusing to educators, but something that we require, and we've really tried to tailor this for you folks. We do have a monitoring, assessment, and performance measures element to our application, what we call the Project Assessment and Evaluation Plan. What our PAEP does is it provides us a framework for evaluating the performance of your project. We have 3 specific things that we'd like to see, and they are highlighted here. So the pollutant load reduction, water conservation, supply reliability, enhancement and recycling, and of course our education, outreach, and capacity building. Please identify these things in your application because we'd like to see these to help us determining if our project goals and targets were met and if we are actually going to be able to identify these things with numerical values to showcase our projects. And of course, you will be able to use it as a guide for writing up your final report to determine if your project was successful. What does a PAEP entail of? Well, we're going to ask 3 specific questions that'll be bulleted, like the project goal, what are the measurement tools and methods that you will use to determine if your project is working, and then a quantifiable number that determines the target. So here we have some examples. Like you'd want to, if the question is identify your project goal, perhaps your project goal is to increase the surface water runoff capture and infiltration into your groundwater basin. We would ask how you were going to measure this. So here we might go outside with a tape measure or a ruler or a rain gauge and determine how much rain fell using our eyes and using the students to go out there and make some measurements. And then, of course, the last part is now that we have the measurements, what did we get as a result? And so in this particular example, we could say that our result is gallons per year of surface water captured and put into the groundwater basin. So it's a way to say this is the goal in the beginning, this is how we're going to do it, and this is what we expect and what we at the Water Board will be given as a result of the project. Then, of course, we have multiple benefits. These are, this is a 5-point thing, but it definitely applies to the overall picture of Cal EPA and how we would like to see other things that might not necessarily be directly related to stormwater capture, but in the end are beneficial to the environment in general. So what might this be? Is it contributing to your urban greening project? Is it reducing flood risks? Or is it reducing carbon dioxide emissions? Is it going to increase water conservation or augment your local water supplies? Will it increase stream habitat by removing pollutant loads from your school property? Or might it just simply increase the awareness of water sustainability and conservation practices? Please identify as many of these multiple benefits as you can come up with and try to justify those because they will be considered. And then, of course, we have bonus points. Our bonus points will be for disadvantaged schools. Attachment 7, you can see, that is one of those optional attachments. If you're not in a disadvantaged school, we won't expect that to come in. But notice that we will hope to see that the way that you will document that you are a disadvantaged school is by the percent of students eligible for free or reduced price meals that must be 80% or higher. And we will award those points on a tiered basis, which is seen right here. 3 points for a school that services only 20% or less. 1 to 20, because if you're serving 0 disadvantaged schools, you cannot get disadvantaged school bonuses. But from 1 to 20 is 3, 21 to 40, 6. Sliding scale heading up. As you can see, if you're at the 81 to 100%, you will get all 15 bonus points. Then, of course, at the end of the application, there's a checkbox that certifies you have confirmed the following: that you are an eligible applicant, that you have an eligible project type, that you will be providing water quality benefits for 20 years through your operation and maintenance project, that projects are not listed in any other proposal, meaning get a hold of your district or county board of education to make sure you're not having two projects submitting for the same thing. That, of course, you're acknowledging that the FAAST application process is public record, and that you have read and agreed to the general terms and conditions of our grant. You will also add your letters of commitment and support as attachment 8. And every project site, meaning every school that a project will be implemented on, must have a letter of commitment, either from a principal, a school administrator, or somebody who has that authority to make that commitment. And also that we have attachment 9, which is the local watershed group membership, an optional attachment. But if you'd like to qualify, you must submit proof of membership via attachment 9. And so just to give you a little primer as to what is a local watershed group membership and how would we document that. We would like to be sure that out of those funds that we showed earlier, North and South together, part of those were Proposition 13 watershed funds. To qualify for 6.8 million of that funding, you must be part of a watershed group that has an interest in protecting nearby waters, and you must provide proof of membership through attachment 9 that documents either the membership itself or a letter from the watershed group verifying that you are a member or a partner. And that is part of Prop 13 statutory requirements. So if you're unable to do that, you will be ineligible for at least $6.8 million worth of funding. Of course, as we had earlier in the day, there is an LID design technical assistance opportunity. So free technical assistance being provided as part of the grant through our partners with LIDI. Priorities will be given to disadvantaged school districts. And if any money is left after those disadvantaged school districts have taken their share, then they will be available for other entities. And an application to receive the technical assistance will be posted to the Drops website. And to reiterate, they would like their applications in at a deadline of October 10th. So if you intend to get assistance from LIDI, please apply early. So the application has a deadline itself. The application deadline is 5 p.m., January 15th. So even though that may seem like a long time from now, it isn't. Please submit early. Call us if you need assistance. And of course, you'll be doing that through the FAAST application process, and we will have an example of that coming up here in just a moment. And we'd also like to get the word out. Are you willing, out there in the viewing world, are you willing to host a workshop? Please let us know. Send a request to Jeffrey Albrecht at waterboards.ca.gov. Let us know how many potential applicants you have, where you could host us, and when you'd like us to be there. Hopefully it would be sometime very soon, and we'd be happy to be there. Some additional sources of information, of course, is on our Drops website. Any Google search for Drops nowadays, fortunately, comes up right to our website. We have an electronic mailing list through our Lyris project, and you can select the school Drought grant program on the mailing list to find that. And so there you can see the subscribe website. Nearly wrapping up, the contact information should come to Jeffrey or myself. There you can see Jeffrey's contact information and phone number, my contact information and phone number. I will be the person that would be doing the pre-approval process for public agencies, so feel free to give me a call to ask questions as to what will be required, and we'll try to walk you through that and make it as painless as possible. And that is going to summarize the application process, but we will have an example of the FAAST application tool itself coming right up. So first, let's see what we got as far as questions.
Anyone in the audience?
Do we want to do in-house? We're going to do some in-house first.
Just to get some clarity, can a district and a county of education submit an application for two different projects?
Can a district and a county for two, so I would say that that would be, we would like you to, we would like the district and the county to coordinate to be sure they're not both stepping over each other's toes. But I would imagine that we would allow that.
Yeah, I would say that if, as long as the district is coordinating with the school districts and verifying that the individual school that would like to apply is not going to be part of their application, that would be an option.
A lot of county offices cover multiple districts, and so we're certainly looking at them applying potentially on behalf of other districts. So, but we don't want overlap between a district that's applying and then the county also applying for schools within that district. So the county could apply for other districts, but not for a district that's also applying. So if it has schools, am I confusing you? A little bit. So if a district applies, the county cannot apply on behalf of that same district for school sites that are within that district, but the county could apply for other districts.
Are there page limits or word count limits in each section of the attachments that will be in play as part of the application process? Or can you write to respond to the prompts without regard to word count or page limit?
As far as the templates go, the Word documents outside of the application, there really is not a limitation there. We do have some guidance, I believe. Like there's some guidance in the technical attachment. When you're in FAAST, though, there are questions there where the text boxes do have word count and character limits that I'm sure Ibby will be happy to touch upon as part of her FAAST presentation. I was also going to, just to go back to the templates while we're on it, I was going to say that, you know, all the stuff that we've presented so far, there's additional guidance that's already kind of outlined in some of those documents. So like in the technical template, you'll see a lot of kind of additional hints as far as what we expect to see in certain sections. And also make sure you refer to our budget example to kind of see what we expect a budget to look like. And also we've attached some sample budgets to show kind of, again, reflecting the categories we'd like to see that'll match up with the categories in the budget, the project admin, the construction implementation, et cetera.
Yeah, actually, back to my reclaimed conversation, you had mentioned before that there were other sources of funding. Would we be able to submit for different grant programs for the same project, or would one exclude us from another?
I guess if you have a water reclamation project in mind, I would probably encourage you to pursue that independent of this grant program. Again, I can certainly help you coordinate the contacting of that person, but I don't see a real advantage to trying to coordinate the two.
It could be potentially used as match if the two projects align, you know, so that could be the difficulty of when you would get one potentially awarded versus the other and whether they would mesh together.
No more in-house questions online?
Okay, we have 3 questions from online. The first is, can grant funds be used to pay for the 20 years of operations and maintenance that are required?
No, they may not. The grant funds will be paying for the implementation of this project, basically everything up to the point where you can get this project implemented, along with the education and outreach aspect. The operations and maintenance of that installation falls on your shoulders. That is your obligation to make sure that what we've paid to get installed is serviceable and working for the that minimum of 20 years. Do you want a follow-up question here? Follow-up question.
Following up on that, if it was necessary to purchase a piece of equipment to use for that 20 years, could that be reimbursed?
If there is a piece of equipment that would be supporting that project, then yes, it would be an eligible option. Special sweepers, yes. Okay, back to the online questions.
Okay, next question. Regarding the PAEP, is baseline information required for the proposal, or can that information be gathered after the grant is awarded?
Baseline information would not be required as part of your application. If you have that and wanted to support your proposal, then by all means include it. We would have, I guess, encourage you to make that baseline information part of your initial implementation to try to figure out where you are currently, so that it gives you a good reference. I think that'd be a great way to support the value of your project, to know where you started and be able to say where you ended.
Okay, last question. I'm going to just paraphrase and ask Jeff to give some more information about how you know who a local watershed group is, and just some guidance on that.
I was going to also expand upon, okay, so local watershed group, I guess, again, going by the definition, the local watershed group needs to have an interest in protecting water quality in that watershed. How do you go about demonstrating membership or partnership? We have, in that attachment 9, we have some guidance. We'd like you to be able to, demonstrate there's a partnership there or a relationship. We do, I guess what didn't make the slide is we did kind of add an additional option on the attachment, which you'll see on our webpage or linked via FAAST in attachment 9. We do have an option that if you can demonstrate as the applicant an interest in doing watershed protection, and demonstrate how you've been actively playing that role in your watershed, submit that as a supporting letter or documentation for consideration. And by all means, if you want to pursue that option, feel free to contact us if you wanted to kind of get some feedback. I would encourage that. But we do want people to be able to meet that requirement. We're trying to make it flexible enough to capture applicants that want to meet that requirement. So if you feel like it's a hard fit, or you want to discuss your ability to address that criteria, then please contact us and we can discuss it further. Okay, we're out of questions online. Last chance. Any more in-house questions? Any last email questions? Other than that, again, we're here to help. We're happy to take your questions. Please feel to contact us with your idiosyncrasies or specific issues. I'm going to be passing off the presentation here shortly, but I will repeat that we're going to be hanging around if you want to have one-on-one discussions later on. But now we're going to be doing our presentation on the Financial Assistance Application Submittal tool. This is going to be presented by Ibiang Rivera. I still need to load your presentation, so if you'll give me a moment, I'll load it. But thank you all for joining us to this point, and now I'm going to pass off to Ibi. I'll put it on here. I didn't verify
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ibian Rivera, and I work here at the State Water Resources Control Board. I'm one of the FAAST administrators. FAAST stands for the Financial Assistance Application Submittal Tool. And our website is located at https://fast.waterboards.ca.gov. And I'm here to answer the question, how to apply for the State Water Resources Control Board's 2014 Drought Response Outreach for Schools drops in FAST. So FAST is a web-based interface that allows applicants to submit their applications electronically. You are able to start an application, edit your application, and submit your application. It's accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And again, our website is listed on the screen in front of you. And it also requires a username and password. So I like to call this our system disclosure. So we have some user or usage recommendations. Number one, use a PC. Clear your internet cookies and cache. Use your Internet Explorer 6.0 or higher. And always, always disable your pop-up blocker, because we do have pop-up messages that appear to kind of guide you through the system. So the DROPS application is comprised of 9 tabs: general information, where you're going to enter some basic information about your project, title, description, and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. The project budget is where you're going to list how much you are requesting and what your match contribution will be. Your funding program, this is important. Funding program is where you're going to select by checking the apply box next to drops to let the system know, hey, this is the program I'm applying for, and please display those questions that are related to it. So the project management tab. Now the project management tab is where you're going to list your project director and your project contact person. You're going to list their phone number and email address. And the person can be one and the same. And when I say project director, I'm referring to the person who's the authorized representative, the person who's going to be signing on the grant agreement. And the day-to-day contact would be the project manager, you know, the person you're going to talk to about the project. Contacts. The contacts tab is where you will be recording who are the contacts for your project. And then you have the legislative information tab, and then legislative information tab is where you will record the primary and secondary districts for the project location.